Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today's a Q&A episode, and I have three questions I want to dive into. So let's get into them. So first is options if I gained too much weight during a build, but I want to continue. So it's a good question, right? Because it's like, all right, do you just keep going? What do you do? And I think one thing I've changed my mind on, and a big mistake I see people make in their building phases or phases where they're trying to be in a calorie surplus, or they're just really focused on building muscle, right? I think that's a big thing is we need to make sure we understand that building phase or a phase where you're outside of your fat loss phase and you're trying to build muscle, again, it doesn't always have to be in a energy surplus, right? You can be at maintenance, and a lot of people, again, would benefit from that. Okay. So again, if you are on the higher, if your body fat is higher, I don't think you need to push a calorie surplus to build muscle. I think for you, okay, maybe muscle gain is your main goal, but we know that being at too high of body fats, too high of weight, that's not great from a long-term health perspective and overall health perspective, right? I just think from a metabolic health standpoint, we're not going to be in a great spot. But some people lose like 10 to 20% of their weight, and then it's really hard to keep going. So then what do you do? And I think that's where you can implement some sort of phase where you get closer to your maintenance and take a break from fat loss. But for some people, you are going to need to, if you really want to build muscle, you are going to have to gain a little bit of weight. And saying this, I think one thing I want to differentiate here is, say you're somebody who maybe you're not as lean as you want to be, but you need to take a break from fat loss. And the mistake I see made is people think that their weight's going to stay the exact same. It's not going to come up at all, right? And if it comes up at all, that means they gained all this body fat, and that's not the case. I think if anytime we go from being in a fat loss phase to eating a little bit more calories, you're going to see your weight come up a little bit, right? And this is just more so water weight than anything. And so we need to make sure that we understand that difference there. That's not you being in surplus. Surplus would be you're gaining X amount of weight week over week for extended periods of time. That would be a surplus, not this like short-term change there. So again, we need to differentiate that, and we need to understand, okay, who would be somebody who would benefit from gaining weight in a surplus? Yeah, who would benefit from gaining weight in a building phase, not in a surplus, because gaining weight would imply that you are in a surplus. So those are the people there. And I think there's just a misapplication of across the board, hey, if you want to build muscle, you need to be in a calorie surplus. And again, that just isn't the case. This is very context dependent, and we need to understand where the person is, right? Because a misapplication of that is somebody who is at higher body fat levels, and it's, oh, hey, I heard I need to gain weight to build muscle. And to me, that's just an excuse of a way to just eat more calories, when again, we probably want to work on that overall body fat percentage, make sure it doesn't get too high, keep it around the same, do a fat loss phase. Maybe you get pretty lean, and then you can start to look at, hey, maybe I now get into a surplus long term. But again, I think the misapplication is just like rushing into a calorie surplus. But again, I'm saying that there are people who try to stay too lean, and they need to gain a little bit of body fat in order to build muscle. So again, it is very context dependent there. So I wanted to bring that up because I think it's good to go over that first before I give you my answer here, so you can understand where I'm coming from on this. So let's say you gain too much weight during your building phase. First, I think but you want to continue. I think the first thing is you need to look at your adherence. At the top of to me, that's high on the priority list. Is, okay, your adherence is probably off. Again, it's easy to be out of a fat loss phase, have a phase where you eat more calories, and it can be an excuse to eat anything and everything. And again, you may be tracking X amount of calories, but if your weight's coming up a little bit more than you'd want, a little bit quicker than you'd want, you're probably just consuming too many, and we just need to improve our adherence. That would be the first thing I would look at. Let's first go there. And from there, if you're still finding that you're gaining weight and adherence is good, and maybe you gained a little bit more than you want, best thing you can do is just go to your maintenance calories. And so this comes back to what I said earlier, where what's one of the prereqs for a calorie or for not being in a calorie surplus? It's, again, too high body fats levels. So if you're someone who maybe you started, I'm just giving you arbitrary numbers here. Don't take these with an absolute number here, but let's say you started your building phase for men, you started at around 13-ish%. You may feel like you're sub 10%, but you're probably closer to, again, you're not like super shredded, but you're also like fairly lean too at 13%. I think a lot of people underestimate how lean 13% can be. So you're in that kind of weird kind of zone there. But for you, you really want to maximize muscle growth. So you decide to go into a surplus. Let's say you gain to 18 to 20% body fat over the surplus. And now it's like, for you, just switch to maintenance, right? Like you have enough body fat on your body now at this point to where you don't necessarily need to be in that surplus to continue to build muscle. So like, I think it makes most sense to go to your maintenance calories. For women, let's say that you started around 22% body fat. Again, that's fairly lean. And so you gain, and let's say you went to 27, 28%, close to 30 maybe. Again, for you, it's like, all right, we're at a body fat percentage where we don't need to be in a energy surplus anymore to continue to build more muscle. Now you can go to your maintenance calories at this point, right? And again, if someone is around those numbers to start their building phase, again, I'd want you to be at maintenance calories versus trying to continue to gain more weight. Now, saying that, obviously what you do in that process is super important, right? We want to make sure we lift weights. We want to make sure we get enough protein. We want to make sure that, again, we're not gaining too quickly. These are all going to be things that are going to ensure that we're gaining more muscle mass than we are body fat. But again, no matter what, you're probably going to be gaining at least a little bit of fat if you're in a calorie surplus, right? But again, we can make sure most of it's going to lean body mass. And again, so I found this approach where maybe we start the building phase in a small surplus and then we transition to maintenance calories once you get to a weight to where you feel pretty good, right? So I have a couple examples. So one, I have a client, my client Greg, he was like low 150s, like he needed to gain weight to build muscle, right? He was in this like kind of low energy state and he was already pretty lean. He had abs, and it's like, all right, if you want to continue to build muscle, like you need to gain some weight. So he gained weight. We slowly brought up his calories again and doing all those things I talked about. And then he got to around 165 and he still has a good body composition, but he got to the point where it's like, hey, I don't necessarily want to gain any more body fat. I looked at his body composition. I thought he was in a good spot. So, okay, dude, let's just switch you to maintenance calories now at this point. Go like drop that energy surplus and maybe get to the high end of your maintenance and really just keep this weight gain like really small, like a very slow trend over time. Again, if you were to look week to week, it looks like your maintenance, but then you zoom out and it's okay, it is slowly trending up. Or let's just keep it around here while again doing all the things that we want to continue to do. And you're in a good spot to continue to add muscle while really minimizing fat gain at that point. Whereas in the past, I may have had Greg at 155 and okay, hey, we're in a building phase. We got to keep pushing that surplus. Let's get to 170, 175. And then really what happens is as you continue to gain more and more weight, just like more of it just becomes body fat, right? Over time. So again, we just really slowing that down is going to be key here. Another example of this, and this at the beginning, is I had a client, Natasha, who basically she came in and she wanted to do a build, right? And so for her thought was, hey, I need to gain weight in order to do a build. But upon further inspection of her body composition, I told her, hey, I think for you, you don't need to be in a surplus to continue to build more muscle, right? Like you need to be around your maintenance calories. If maybe you don't want to do a fat loss phase right now, that's totally fine. But we want to try to get you into this closer to your maintenance calories. I think you're going to get a lot more out of being at your maintenance calories, really focus on adding muscle, and then we can always come to a fat loss phase later. But for you, just adding more weight to your body composition, you're just going to be really unhappy with it. You're going to continue to get further away from the physique goal that you want. And it's just probably not putting you in the greatest position to build muscle. I know there's been some back and forth here of you can build muscle at higher body fats, and you certainly can, but I do think it's not the most optimal place. It's like, again, insulin sensitivity potentially is lower, right? So you're more insulin resistant. So it's going to be harder to like your body really utilize the nutrients you give it. Growth hormone is impacted at when there's more insulin resistance, right? And that's going to be helpful from a lean body mass perspective. So again, there's just things that as we get higher and higher in body fat percentage, it's just not going to be great from a building muscle standpoint. And so again, it's really context dependent, but having this approach where you don't have to necessarily continue to be in a calorie surplus the entire building phase, you can always just transition to maintenance. And you're probably at that point then going to see a little bit of a recomp, right? Where it's now we're really minimizing fat gain, and yes, muscle growth is a little bit slower, but, and again, not in all cases, right? Obviously, the higher your body fats are and you're at maintenance, I think you could still build muscle in a really good, again, it's probably going to be unnoticeable essentially, right? I think it's hard to say. Again, I think genetics are going to play a massive role in that. But you do that and you get this recomp effect where you see you could decrease your body fat percentage a little bit, right? Again, you're not necessarily losing fat, but if our weight stays around the same or adding muscle, that's going to decrease your body fat percentage there. So again, you can start to see that at a certain point. And again, how much is that? Like, how much weight does that need to be? I think it really just depends on many different things, right? It depends on your overall muscle gain goals, your current body fat percentage, obviously, where you feel most comfortable, where you feel your best, which is going to be different for everybody, right? Let's take guys, for example, somebody may feel better. They may feel really great at 18% body fat, but once they get to 15, maybe they don't feel as great, right? So for them, that's okay. And then, but once they get from 18 to 20% body fat, that's where maybe now like they start to get a little bit more insulin resistant. They have a little bit more systemic inflammation. They just don't feel as great. Digestion starts to decrease. Energy levels start to decrease. Then for there, it's okay. Hey, we want to stay in that spot, maybe a little bit lower there. But for some people, they can go even higher than that. So again, I think the body fat percentage is going to be a big thing here, and where you feel your best. And again, from a mental perspective, where do you feel best with your physique? And again, like some of this needs to be like, okay, hey, you need to be okay with a little bit of fat gain. You can't always be your absolute leanest, but at the same time, like we want to make sure you feel good in your body as well too, right? Like the worst thing you can do is do a phase like this and then you just gain a bunch of body fat because you feel like you have to, but you're super unhappy with your look, and that impacts your day to day, right? So again, there is that kind of give and take with that in terms of finding out what that sweet spot is. And again, what range allows you to really push your training as well too there. So again, these are all things there. So that's how I would go about it. Again, I went over how I go about building phases now. Again, for some people, it's, hey, we're going to be at maintenance the whole time. For some people, it's going to be, hey, we need to gain a little bit of weight and then go switch to maintenance versus continuing to just gain week over week, month over month, because you set out, hey, I need to do a 6 to 12 month building phase, right? So just be careful with that thought process. Now, obviously, on the flip side, fat loss, you can't really do that, right? You just have to continue to lose body fat, but you can utilize things like diet breaks and refeeds in terms of like manipulating, okay, you want to be in a deficit to continue to push fat loss down, but you can be at maintenance for a couple days, weeks, and then continue to push down. But you can't go to maintenance long term and expect to like still see progress. Again, you could see maybe a little bit of a recomp. If we really want to maximize fat loss, you do need to make sure you're in that energy deficit there. So hopefully that answers that. And if you have any follow-ups, just let me know. All right. Is it common to be ravenously hungry on maintenance calories? So I would say I don't think it's common, and we probably don't want to feel ravenously hungry. Now, my big thing is, how long have you been at maintenance? If you lost 10% or more of your body weight and you just got to maintenance calories, you're going to be hungry for a little bit. That's going to happen, right? That's your body, depending on how much weight you lost, where your body feels good at, how long you dieted for, how aggressively you dieted for. Like, those are all going to be things that impact like how hungry you are and how long. And then obviously genetics play a role as well too. Some people are just going to have that drive to get back to where they were more than others. And again, that's just a kind of genetic component there. But obviously we want to look at certain things too. And so I'll go over that. But that would be my first question is like, where are you at? Now, again, if you're 3 months in to being at maintenance calories and you're still feeling that way, there's definitely some things we want to look at. So again, what's the timeline here on this, I think is super important. But again, if this was a case with a client, we're going to look at, are you trying to stay too lean? So I just went over, people feel better at certain body fat percentages than others. And again, this comes back to, you may just be trying to stay too lean and your body may not be comfortable with that level of leanness. So you have to decide, hey, is this okay? And again, I think from an overall health perspective, long-term body composition standpoint, again, you probably don't want to feel that way, but really it comes down to if that's something you want to do. Like for some people, they just really have to go out of their way to maintain a leaner look than others. So you could just be staying too lean for your body. And only you can decide if that is something if that's worth it to you or not. And obviously we want to make sure you're in a good place health-wise, right? So this is where potentially utilizing some blood work could be helpful here in this situation to make sure that's in a good spot. If you're finding that like thyroid super low, your hormones are out of whack, or your testosterone super low as male, again, these would be some signs that, hey, you might be just staying too lean. And then obviously we want to pair that with the biofeedback, how they feel. Or your energy level is super low, you just feel like it's really hard to train, you're not really building any muscle, super hungry, things like that, right? Like those are things we want to, gut health as well too. These are all things that we'd want to also pair with that. Second, are you actually at maintenance? And this kind of goes back to that last one in a way, but some people get super scared to see like just 2 pounds come up. And so they do everything in their power to keep their calories low to where they're never going to see that come up. And that can be a tough game to play. And so you may think you're at maintenance, but you're actually like still in a deficit, right? So again, you actually need to see if you're actually at maintenance. And again, all the things I just talked about, we would look at again. Could we improve your food quality? So for example, if you eat mostly kind of low volume foods, then you could improve that. So if you're like, hey, I'm at maintenance now, I can go crazy with my calorie or my food choices. And now a big chunk of your calorie amount is low food volume, low nutrient dense foods, high calorie dense type foods. It's going to be tough to stick with that. So again, that could be part of it. Could we improve your meal timing? Is it, hey, we need to set up your meals in a certain way to help offset your hunger, right? Maybe you have a period of time where like you have 6+ hours where you don't eat, or within that 6+ hours, you have 2 meals on the front end and the back end that are like really low food volume. They don't really fill you up, right? They're more snacky type meals. Again, can we improve that? Is it, hey, we need to make sure we eat a little bit more calories early in the day. So again, we want to look at your meal timing to see that. Next, it would be like sleep. Again, we know sleep can impact your hunger and cravings. It can make you hungrier. And then stress as well too, right? Has that been a little bit higher? Again, if you're someone who in the past has struggled with like when you get stressed, you tend to want to eat more. Again, that could be something that is causing you to be ravenously hungry, right? So again, ideally, you would not be ravenously hungry at your true maintenance, because that would be one of the goals here of getting to maintenance is, okay, we want to offset some hunger. We don't want to always be hungry. So those would be things I would look at. And it's definitely something worth looking into if that's you there. All right. So weight is static, slow, steady performance gains. Does this imply recomp? It's definitely a good sign, but we'd still want to look into this a bit more, right? So weight is basically stay the same. You're seeing some performance gains. Again, I want to know what those performance gains are. What does that look like? Within that, it's okay. Are you like, what does your training look like? If you're just doing like strength-based movements where you're like testing your one rep max and that's going up. Okay. So maybe that's, again, yeah, your performance is going up, but strength gains don't automatically mean that you're building muscle, right? That's good. It's a good sign, but it depends what the rep range is that we're working in. What exercise are you using? What does your technique look like? Are you cheating that technique to get it? And then obviously all the other things, the making sure you get enough protein, recovery, enough calories, etc., to complete that process there. It's a good sign, but this wouldn't be enough information to know for sure that you are recomping, right? So what would be some other things we'd want to look at? What do your progress pictures look compared to previous ones? Progress pictures aren't always the greatest thing to use because they can mask some results and it can get in your head, but we want to use it with these other things as well too. What are your circumference measurements doing? So if you're finding that you're around the same weight, you're slow steady performance gains, and then like your midsection is going down, again, good sign that you're recomping. How your clothes fitting, again, if they're feeling looser and say like the midsection around your waist, but then like maybe a little bit tighter around your shoulders and they just fit better, again, that's a great sign. And then does it seem like you are adding muscle? Are you actually adding muscle? And you can typically like, again, it's hard to see for some people when they're recomping, they can visually see it. So that would be another sign there. So again, we just want to look into this a little bit more. It's hard to say just based on those things. I think really the big takeaway here is performance gains are good, but I think it's like, what are you tracking? What are the performance gains? And understanding that just because your strength is going up doesn't necessarily mean that you are building muscle, right? There's other things that go into that. So that's it for this episode. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. Again, I appreciate everybody who listens. Next, if you have any questions on this podcast or you just want to give me a follow, I'm most active here on social media, on Instagram, Jeff. Again, I'm just a DM away if you have any questions. And then lastly, if any of this stuff rings true to you and you need some more guidance on it and you have questions on it, then my free 30-minute strategy calls for you. We'll make sure that you have a good game plan moving forward. If that is something you're interested in, the link to that is in the show notes, and I'll chat with you guys next time.